Hi everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes for a few more people to join and then we'll get started. So first thing I'd like to do is to introduce you to our lovely panel today and then conscious we've only got half an hour, so let's delve into our topic of today. But first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Samantha Wilson from Lifelink Workwell. Samantha is our clinical manager and clinical expert. Felice Bretman is our service delivery manager and looks after all of our lovely clients at Lifelink Workwell, delivery of all of our different services. And we have Claire Smith from Bauer Media, who is an HR partner for Bauer Media and also runs the Thrive Wellbeing Programme across the organisation. So thank you very much for coming along, everyone. Today, we're going to explore how to identify and support not just employees, but also employers around mental health and well-being in the workplace. So I'm sure everyone on the call has some experience of the challenge that faces your organisation. I could talk all day about statistics. I'm not going to, but I'm just going to throw a few out there just to set the scene and put it in some context. But in terms of productivity, in terms of absenteeism, in terms of long-term sickness, absence, that they're all challenges that we face, and we want to do more to support our employees to lessen the burden on the organisation, but also to make sure that we have a happy and thriving workforce. So going back to 22-23, in the UK, there were 17.1 million days lost due to stress, absence or anxiety. That relates to an average of 19.6 days for each person. Now, that's nearly 4 weeks of work out of the year. So when you put it into context, that's a big impact on that person's life and in the organisation. It's worthwhile saying that both of those statistics are higher than pre-COVID levels, so we can see that the trend and the balance is moving in the wrong direction. Something else that I just wanted to call out is 51% of long-term sickness is down to stress, anxiety and depression as well. And when you look at that category, that equates to about, it costs the UK economy about £28 billion per annum. So a huge challenge that we're all trying to manage collectively. Huge challenge, growing challenge, and it impacts organisations of all sizes and all industries in different ways. So today we'll delve a little bit into how you can manage that in the way that works for your organisation. So as an employer, what can we do? The first thing we need to look at is how do we actually identify some of your employees we will know have mental health challenges, and that's all being managed very effectively. But how do you identify if there's a change in a person's behaviour? How do you identify if there's a decline in their mental health? What are the things that we need to look out for that would be triggers that we as an employer have a responsibility to support that person? So Samantha, if I could pass over to you, please.
Sure. Yeah, well, you kind of touched on them a bit there, that it's a change in behaviour that we would be recognising, and that'll be individual to each of your employees. So anything that seems to be kind of out of pocket, out of character for that person. It could be low levels of engagement, whether they normally really enjoy putting out a newsletter, or they talk around the water cooler, but just not participating in normal activities that they do. Maybe lack of engagement in team meetings, people having their cameras off. I appreciate that people do like to have their cameras off at times, but if it's a change for that individual, that's when we want to be paying attention to it. A reduction in productivity. And that will be different for every industry. So sometimes productivity can be quite difficult to measure. So each of you will all have ways of checking that out for your employees. And we can't speak to all of them, but we can maybe, if there's specific questions, we can look at them later. changes in sleeping or appetite. So I guess that is through conversations you might hear it, or you might notice it just in people's eyes, how they turn up at work. If there is a change with their sort of presentation, then that's how we can notice that there's maybe a mood change for them. Absenteeism is definitely a good indicator of possible mental health issues, or a change to how they their working pattern, how they are requesting their working pattern to change. It could also be actually they've withdrawn. If you're quite a social organisation, they've withdrawn from social aspects of work entirely, and they're not connecting with you. If you're maybe their line manager, you know, they're not having normal discussions with you. Real worries, like worries that seem relatively irrational, so constant worrying, a bit of paranoid sort of thinking, you know, like I'll never be good enough. These are areas that I would pay attention to.
And Felice, Claire, anything else from your side and anything that you would pinpoint as a trigger?
I think for us, Samantha covered a lot of it in terms of the things that we would pick up on. I guess also worth mentioning is that sometimes these can be masked, these things. Sometimes someone
Absolutely.
can be going through a situation and can mask it very well. If they're not, if they are working hybrid, you can be going in and doing a job. So it's having that really good relationship with your team, so that you can pick up on these changes when they appear, because they can easily be missed if someone is, you know, is masking their situation. And we've seen it before in where I work. And I think it's just having that um, having that good level of communication. So if you are having regular calls, if you are all working across the country and you are remote, for example, that you're having that space and time each week when you are meeting to be able to notice these things, to be honest with you, because I think they can be missed if it's someone that's quite happy and they remain, you know, putting that mask on just for team meetings, and you're a bit uncertain, then to delve a bit deeper and have, you know, try and have a bit more one-to-one conversations with them.
Okay. And
Mm.
Claire, we had talked previous to this call, managers can sometimes get a little bit panicked when the word mental health comes up, and often mental health and mental illness can become quite confused,
Yeah.
and panic sets in around how to deal with that. So could you maybe just spend some time talking about the two
Yeah.
different scenarios and how you would
Yeah.
identify the difference from both?
So I think from the outset, it's about educating your teams, not just managers, but colleagues, so that they all have a very much an awareness around that, and understanding that, you know, mental health is a broad term that refers to your overall well-being of a person's mind, whilst mental illness is a specific condition that can affect a person's mental health. Um, so for us, it's really, you know, removing the stigma. And educating our people so that they know that just because your mental health isn't in great shape, it doesn't mean you have mental illness. And also that just because someone has been diagnosed and maybe living with mental illness, it doesn't mean that their mental health is currently in a bad place. It's really important to understand the differences, because if they feel they understand the differences, they're much more likely to feel comfortable approaching the conversation in the right way. So we do a lot of education, and you know, we have 3,000 people across the UK, and I still have managers that, if they're a new manager, you know, we have it in training in terms of well-being in place, but they'll come to the situation and they'll say, gosh, this came up, I haven't dealt with it before. I know I had training, but and we just spend time with them to remind them, you know, it's okay to approach a person if, you know, you think their mental health is suffering. And I think for us, it's also understanding that it may be something impacted at work, but understanding that the key factors outside of work and what they are. I mean, we know at Bauer the key factors that impact someone's mental health are their sort of caring responsibilities with family, financial difficulty, and general health and well-being. So if you've got a really good working relationship with your team, you know, and even if that you are hybrid, you know how they're doing outside of work. That's key as well, because you'll pick up on these things that essentially affect someone's mental health in the day to day. at work. And that's essentially where it comes from us. It is getting to the factors that impact the mental health before it raises up, and gets worse, I think, because otherwise someone could be sort of bumbling along, have a few issues that are going on with their family, they don't feel comfortable to speak about it. Whereas if they feel, actually, I work in an open culture where I can talk about what's going on, I can go and say to my manager, look, my teenager right now is having issues at school, I'm struggling a bit, I need a bit of support and flexibility, then you can have that two-way conversation.
I think Claire's absolutely right. And I think a lot of people don't realise or that everybody has mental health. And just like you, if you've got a back problem, you have good days and you have bad days. It can be the same with mental health. And I think, people think, well, mental health is only for those people that have got issues. But actually, we've all got it. We all have mental health.
Yeah, it's very much a spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Felice, just to move on from that slightly, not all employees are comfortable talking about their mental health, and some aren't even self-aware of their mental health or any warning signs or a change or decline in their mental health. So how can an employer approach that situation and help that person to identify and open up?
You're absolutely right, Lyndsay. When it comes to mental health, not everyone feels comfortable talking about how they're feeling. And some people might not even realise that they even need support. But there are a number of ways that we can help. So firstly, we need to normalise mental health conversations in the workplace. Openness, I think Claire's already mentioned this. We need to encourage people and employees to feel safe talking about their feelings. I think that's really important. And there are ways that we can do that. Potentially we can look at doing anonymous surveys across the organisation to gauge how people are feeling. That includes maybe some pulse checks every now and again, and some staff forums. All of these things kind of give employees a voice and a chance to be heard. And I think Claire's touched on this. Education for me is key. It's vitally important so that employees can identify for themselves the early warning signs of stress, of anxiety and of mental health challenges, and be able to not only recognise the signs, but be given those tools and techniques and maybe some tips to be able to deal and cope with that. And I think Claire also touched that it's the managers that are vitally important in that education piece, because they have the close contact with our people on a daily basis. And it could be done, the training could be done through educational workshops, some educational posters. There's lots of online resources out there. And then I would probably say that the last thing, and probably sometimes people forget that, modelling good practice is another way of all of us getting involved, openly discussing mental health challenges, taking regular breaks, going for walks at lunchtime, prioritising self-care, making sure you've got a good work-life balance. So really by leading by example, we can help set the tone and encourage our own teams to do the same.
So I know we've got some participants on the call today who come from our hospitality industry, who come from retail industry, and you're coming up to your busiest period of the year where it's high staff turnover, but very, very difficult to take people away from the day job. So high stress environment, but also, the most difficult time of the year to take people off of the shop floor, to take them out of the restaurant environment, to support them. So I think question to everyone in the panel is, how can we support all industries, but bearing in mind those really high stressful environments? What are some simple tools and tips that we can put out, but also what does a more enduring program look like to support both employers and employees to make a long-term impact and a long-term difference to employees' mental health?
For me, Lyndsay, there's lots of things we could talk about here, but I think, some people-friendly HR policies that include mental health also, really helps. I'm sure, Claire, you've got lots of examples of that within your organisation, and I'm sure you find that works.
Yeah, we've got a whole host of family-friendly policies. We've got wellbeing policy, and we've got EAP, and we've got support from EAP for managers as well. And I guess it's it's a proactive approach for us. It's in our culture and our DNA here in terms of wellness and well-being. It's in our strategy. It's top down. You know, aside from the HR team and aside from mental health first aiders, we also have the Thrive team that you touched on, Lyndsay, when you introduced me. So I lead Thrive, and for us, it's our well-being. It's an internal team, but it's not. It's although I lead it, I have sponsors from our exec team, but it's made up of 8 people across the business from all walks of life, from all areas of the business, and we come together once a week, half an hour, and we create content. And the idea of it is essentially by Bauer people for Bauer people, and we create regular content, be it half an hour videos, podcasts, sessions on boundaries at work, sessions on nutrition, or we have Thrive Week, go and take a walk, like you said, Felice, and obviously in all industries that's not always possible. We understand that, and it's not always possible with some of our roles. We have people presenting on radio shows, so they can't just leave the desk and go for a walk all the time. But there's different measures to put in place, and understanding the boundaries when you're at work, and the importance of taking a break and making sure that you have those boundaries set. So we create content year round. It's something, it's in our DNA, as I said. It's part and parcel of what we do, and that's part of our culture. So the idea is, as you said, Felice, as well, we want people to share stories. So we've started a session this year where we've now got Thrive Presents, where we have a video panel. And we have people who are real employees talking about their experiences, be it with mental health, with caring responsibilities, and they're bringing it to life. So people know, actually, I might be suffering inside, but and it's okay to talk about it because other people are normalizing it. And we often have those panels where we have an expert on the panel. We'll have someone from HR talking about the policy side of it and what you can do and how we can support you. And we'll have employees giving their real life experiences and what we've done to support them at work. So that's some of those sessions are the most powerful, if I'm honest. We video them. People can watch them in their own time because our workforce work around the clock, like a lot of others. And so, it needs to be accessible. So we've got that. And then we're also looking at doing lots more podcasts because we know it's also quite difficult to attract our male audience. When we have a lot of Thrive sessions, if they're running lunchtimes, we know, and our workforce is probably sort of 60% female, 40% male. But on a lot of our sessions, we get probably 85% female take up. And it's really hard to attract the guys. And we want to do more of that because, men's health is so important. So we're trying to do a bit more around podcasting because we know generally from experience of surveys that men listen differently. Their listening habits are very different. So we're looking at podcasts and we're looking at what we can do to attract that audience a bit more. But sort of going back to your initial question, I think it's understanding what works for your workforce and teams and asking them and doing surveys and trialing things. You might not always get it right, but give it a go. If an idea comes up. And Thrive, we run on a really limited budget. And I can tell you, we have to get a lot of stuff for free, or we use internal experts. If you've got someone who, in their spare time, is a personal trainer, as we did recently, they ran a session on exercise in menopause for us. Utilize the skills that you have within the business. That it really helps us. And if people know that they work for Bauer, it goes down even better. Their employees sharing their experiences. So, yeah.
I think that's really true, isn't it? It's the employee engagement and it's having that value be part of the culture, the value of mental health and mental well-being, and encouraging employee engagement through surveys, through conversations, and making them accessible to as many people. You have to sort of reflect on it, don't you? You have to hold it in mind constantly, have conversations with your staff and review it. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time,
and that's okay.
You value it.
And I think that the employees value that you're giving things a go, you're trying them out. That didn't work. What would we do differently next time? But we are trying, and we're coming up with content that reaches a lot of our demographic and our audience, and that is what we're focusing on.
And employee needs change. You know, 5 years ago, we would never expect that we would be in the working environments we're in now. So it's adapting to the needs and trends of your environment, which takes me nicely on to one of the Q&A questions that have come in from the audience, actually. We've got one of our listeners today who has a predominantly remote working organisation. And they feel it makes it harder to spot those signs, to identify those issues. So any tips, Felice, Samantha,
Yep.
Claire, that could just help, because it's that bit trickier to get under the skin of it?
Of course it is, and that's why it's really important to have regular check-ins with these individuals. More regular conversation, you're touching base at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. How's your day gone? Just having those open conversations. I think that really helps. Making sure that these people still feel that they are part of the organisation and that they have a voice. So making sure that, there's some collaborative working going on, whether that's through team meetings, whether that's through some, team building stuff that's happening. And it's a real fear of isolation for some people. They get kind of get scared to leave the house after a little while of working at home for so long. So it's, it's recognising the challenges of working from home and what you can do in the organisation to try and impact on some of those. So whether it be, arranging a walking group after work or before work or at the weekend, or, some sort of community activities, really.
Yeah, and I think ensuring that they have space in their diary, if you're worried about somebody's well-being, then make sure that they are actually blocking time out for lunch or breaks, and being curious, what is it you're doing with that time? How's that going for you if you just sit in the house or you go and do the washing? We know the perils of working from home might be that actually you never really take a break. So we know it as individuals, as humans, it might be happening for them too. Ask about it.
Yeah. Leading by example, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
Some of our managers can be contacting people at lunchtime to give them that space, and also we try and do it, whereas we encourage some of our managers to have walk and talk. So, okay, let's both go for a walk. Have you got time to go? You go for a walk and we'll have a phone call. But if they're not getting out and that they're suffering with, take action and say, why don't you go for a walk, where you live? It could be half an hour, but let's take the call outside if the weather's suitable in this country. But I think look at opportunities where you can change things to support them, essentially. But again, we all need to lead by example, and we all are worst enemies sometimes. It'll be lunchtime and you're having a sandwich, but just pause, stop and think, is this a good time? Can this email wait? If it can, don't send it. Otherwise you're sort of not leading by example, really, are you? You're sort of saying it's okay now, and I need, and someone more junior, very junior, may think, oh, I need to reply straight away. So it's putting those parameters in place.
Yeah, they may think that the culture is that's the expectation.
Yeah, something should be. Sorry, Samantha. Something we've done at Lifelink is ensure that we've even got 15 minutes before and after each meeting to give people some breathing space, so that they're not going into back-to-back meetings as well.
Love that.
Yeah, giving people a little bit of time just to recover from one before moving on to the next.
Thank you. So we've probably got time for one more quick question, if that's okay, just before we wrap up. I've got one here, an organisation that has a high staff turnover due to a lot of seasonal staff, a retail organisation. It can often be hard to engage because people know they're only with your organisation for a short period of time. So how do you make them feel part of that culture? How do you make them feel involved and supported? And where longer term programs, sort of one-to-one counselling over a longer term period, might not be suitable, what's the best way to interact with this audience and support them over that shorter term period?
You go, Samantha. You go.
Sorry, I'm thinking about even the recruitment process, and building that into the enthusiasm about, you are engaging with us for this level of time at seasonal work, but that means that you get the opportunity to really contribute to how we will be as an organisation going forward. So I guess it's about recognising how much you need them for that seasonal time too, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, really. It's making that environment inclusive to make them feel just as important. You know, we have a lot of freelancers. We don't have seasonal staff, but we have freelancers. And whilst they obviously don't have the same employment contract rights, they still very much feel part of the business and part of the DNA. And you don't know when they might come back and work for you again in the future and in what capacity. And you want them to go away with a good experience of your organisation and to go and say, do you know what, I did some temp work there, they were great. You know, I'd definitely go back and work there. And you want them to want to return. So it's from the outset, you know, treating them the same if you know, where you can, really.
Absolutely. It's about recognising that it's a really stressful time. People, you know, working in a busy, busy environments and back-to-back customers or back-to-back, appointments or reservations. So, you know, it's allowing people still to have some sort of space to debrief and de-stress at the end of that busy day, and tell people how they're feeling. So again, it's all about that, you know, allowing that safe space for people to be able to talk and get the support that they need. Should they start to find it all a bit overwhelming, and it's having whether it's, you know, mental health ambassadors or somebody in place that these people can speak to when that overwhelming feelings start to overtake.
I guess maybe I was just thinking about, you know, the managers that might be supporting those staff, that it's equipping them to hold the pressure that they're going to feel during these times in mind. And I worked in retail many moons ago, and you know, you had to do a bit of prep. It's like you were training, you were getting your body prepared for it and your mind prepared for all of what was about to happen. And my manager had to do that too. And then when I became a manager, I had to do that, to think, how am I going to support the staff here?
Great. Well, thank you very much. That's us just about out of time. I'm conscious that we do have a few other questions that we've not managed to touch on today. But if you could leave that with us, one of us will reach out to you over the next few days and follow up. Equally, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to come via Lifelink Workwell LinkedIn site, and we'll be more than happy to answer those for you. But thank you so much to Claire, Samantha and Felice. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of today.